Hi, I'm Joyce Harper, Professor of Reproductive Science at the Institute for Women's Health at University College London. Welcome to Season 3 of my podcast, Why Didn't Anyone Tell Me This? This season, we'll be diving into topics that explore how to achieve good health and happiness. I'll be speaking with leading experts who will provide evidence-based advice and debunk some of the many myths around our health. Additionally, I'll be having conversations with individuals who bring unique perspectives through their lived experiences. In Season 3, we'll cover a diverse range of topics, including reproductive anatomy, inspiring female icons, chronic health conditions, factors that influence our well-being, and global women's health issues. I really hope you enjoy Season 3 of Why Didn't Anyone Tell Me This? Welcome to another episode in my series on reclaiming joy. And today I'm speaking to Harrison Ward from Addiction to Adventure, the Fell Foodie's Recipe for Joy. Harrison, otherwise known as the Fell Foodie, loves the mountains. They're his solace, his gym, and his kitchen. Harrison began suffering from depression and suicidal thoughts during puberty and discovered alcohol. Whilst working in multiple roles in the hospitality trade, as a coping mechanism, he was drinking up to 20 pints a day and taking up smoking full time as he battled his mental illness. In 2016, when his relationship broke down, he vowed to get sober, remove alcohol from his life, stop smoking, and really try and turn things around. He filled the void that was left by alcohol with a combination of hiking and cooking, gradually tackling more and more of the Lake District fells. He has always loved cooking from a young age and used to cook with his grandmother. From the age of 10, he studied cookbooks and cooking shows quite religiously. Harrison began sharing his culinary adventures via social media in 2017 and soon captured people's imaginations using a stove and simple ingredients to create hearty but delicious meals. After being sober for 2 years in 2018, Harrison shared the full background to his story with his followers, including how he had lived with mental health issues and struggled with alcohol. His profile on social media has continued to grow as he has gained coverage in the news and on TV. He now has thousands of followers and continues to share his experience of mental health and open-air cooking online and via the media, as well as to corporate clients and schools. Welcome, Harrison.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So it's going to be great to talk to you today, Harrison. And I always start by finding out a little bit more about my guest's life. So tell me about your life to date and how you became the Fell Foodie.
Yes, let's run through the whole life in 30 seconds or so, shall we? I mean, these days I'm probably best known for taking a little camping stove up into the mountaintops and trying to cook sort of restaurant-style food in those wonderful areas. And along this sort of journey, I sort of share really my honest thoughts about my own personal journey, how I found the outdoors, how I've suffered from sort of mental health, how I've recovered from sort of alcoholism, bits out there, because life was very different for me previously. I started having some sort of depression, I suppose, issues in my teenage years that really wasn't caused by any particular moment. It was just something that sort of came overnight for me. I wasn't sure what I was going through. There was no trauma moment as such, but it was something that I really sort of suppressed and kept very quiet and internal to myself for many, many years. Not wanting to be that burden, really wanting to not put myself on other people, bring them down with my feelings. And I guess back then as well, the internet being in sort of its infancy, we didn't maybe have the same sort of film stars, movie stars speaking out about mental health as such. I didn't really know what I was going through as such at the time. So it just seemed very much an overnight thing, going from this quite confident, outgoing character to someone that internally was really suffering a lot with demotivation and insecurity. And it's something that I just sort of suffered along with. I know you sort of touched upon the intro, my journey there sort of through the hospitality trade and various bits, but finding sort of alcohol as a big sort of cut-off for my mind really at this point. I wasn't someone that really was down sort of the park with a bottle of cider in my early years. There were slight introductions to alcohol, I guess, through parents and bits out there, as there would be sort of in home lifestyle. But it was really 18 for me. I think that changed, that rite of passage, that cultural move, I suppose, in the UK as well, heading out there, especially as perhaps, a bloke, maybe in the rural areas too. It was just where you were sort of maybe pushed to go to. That was the next path, I suppose, following the footsteps in a way. And initially, it gave me that real sort of escape from those darker thoughts in my head to moments of suicidal ideation, not wanting to be here, really questioning my purpose, and just not knowing what I was really going through at all in that extent. So things really snowballed for me, as you touched upon there. I mean, really drinking to quite excess and using this as a very much a medicinal tool in my lifestyle. But as time went on, this really became clear that this was more of a poison in my life, really. It was dragging me further and further down. It wasn't really alleviating those thoughts anymore. I was just sedating myself every day, drinking to oblivion to try and shut off these thoughts, to try and stay present, I guess, with other people. Because really, internally, I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to be present anymore at all on that sort of path. But thankfully, I mean, I suppose how you look at it at that moment, I had a major breakdown in 2016. Life really came crumbling down for me, the end of a relationship. And it really made me come to terms with how far I'd maybe fallen individually. I didn't believe I was this person I'd maybe become. I didn't believe the fact that sort of the way alcohol was controlling my life at this point now. It was my sole focus, getting up every day. That was the one thing I wanted. I was still working in the trade, living in, kid in a sweet shop, and very much sort of coming to terms with the fact that this was taking over my life. And I came to terms with the fact I was an alcoholic at this point. Came back to Cumbria, where I was originally from, put my hands up for the first time in my life. This is 12 years now suffering in silence, not speaking to friends, not speaking to family, barely seeking any sort of medical support. I mean, a couple of little bits, maybe slight moments that possibly gave those interventions, but nothing I followed through on. And coming back, I put my hands up on my personal Facebook page at the time and just said, look, I've got to come back to where I'm from. I've got to sort myself out here. I've got a problem with alcohol. And tried to throw myself into fitness as a way of trying to fill that void. And one friend turned at my doorstep one day and said, right, we're going to go for a hike in the Lake District. And whilst I was brought up in Carlisle, just outside the lakes, I didn't embrace what was on my doorstep at all for many, many years in my younger life. I knew the beauty that was there. I enjoyed sort of playing sports and things and going down the woods, but didn't embrace the mountains at all. And I was taken into these hills by a close friend, and it really sparked this passion, this love, as I was trying to make this big, big change going forward, trying to lose weight, trying to leave alcohol behind, throw my last pack of cigarettes in the bin, and trying to move forward, using the outdoors and activity to try and recover from that place I'd fallen into. And around there is where the sort of the Fell Foodie came about, really. It was a love of food and a love of the fells. We tend to call the hills fells in the north of England. And it was merging those two passions. And I suppose sharing that story online to some degree. Initially, it was very much anonymous. I didn't share who I was. And looking back, I guess I chose that nickname possibly to hide behind still. I was still wearing that mask in a way, in a bit. And I used the logo and various bits out there. And I just shared the views I was experiencing and the food I was cooking at home at the time, because it was very important how I fueled myself as well. You know, sort of drinking and sort of falling in the kebab shop at 4 a.m. most nights wasn't really helping me move forward. And there's no wonder I wasn't feeling so great each day, even though I wasn't feeling great at the base level. But trying to eat better from fresh again, trying to fuel myself forward, to try and power myself up these hills and recover from sort of that substance abuse. Looked at the food a lot more. And it wasn't long before that food started coming on the adventures with me. Through packed lunches at first, and then eventually getting a stove and cooking out there on the mountaintops. And that's where the Fell Foodie was born.
Harrison, you've made me cry.
Oh, bless you.
Yeah, I don't.
Sorry.
I was just telling you before we came on. So I've got three boys. My eldest is 22, and I know it's hard. It's hard for everybody, but I think well, having boys, I'm really aware of suicide rate, and I've only cried once on a podcast before. The other person was crying as well, but you really have made me cry, because your story is so full of motivation for. I think many people listening to you are going to have been or be still in that dark place. And it is hard, and it's easy to pick up some alcohol and drink and keep drinking, and it's sorry it's just amazing that your balls started running at the right time. And then that person that took you up the mountains, I love them dearly. I'm sure you love them as well. And I just think you were at a place of, really dark place at, rock bottom, and you've pulled it around. And I think your story and the fact that you've put it on social media, it doesn't matter that you put it on anonymously to start with, I think to put, as you said, put your hands up and say this is just been so important. And I think your message, so it's such a privilege to be talking to you today, honestly. And I didn't expect to cry. Sorry. It was just your words were incredible. They were so moving. So I'm a bit
Thank you.
teary.
Well, I'm sorry to start it off so emotionally. Yeah,
No, it's
that's
fine.
fine as well. It's
It's fine. I'm not a crier actually. I don't cry very often. I know there's some people. We've been looking at hypersensitivity personality recently, and I've got a lot of friends that are very emotional, and I'm not very emotional. But Harrison, no, I think your story is so important, and so tell us more about the outdoors. So the lakes is a ridiculously beautiful place, and I'm a long way from them. I'm about 6 hours from the lakes, and I had a conference in Lake Windermere last year, and I took one of my sons, and we had a few days driving around in my camper van, and it is a wonderful place. So why do you? What is it about being outdoors and mountains and lakes and all that? What is it that really helped you in that situation, and to this day still helps you?
I mean, I suppose ultimately this has been something that I guess as time goes on, you look at quite a bit in terms of appreciating perhaps the privilege you had of growing up in an area like this. I mean, I grew up just on the edge of Hadrian's Wall, so on the border of Scotland. So the Lake District was obviously very much, it was the jewel really of the area. You were proud to talk about it when you talked about being from Cumbria. But it wasn't really something I was really embracing much in my younger years. Perhaps a couple of school field trips there, maybe, and otherwise it was coffee and cake on a day trip, probably with the family. That was about it, really. But I was still embracing the outdoors through other means, of course. It was on the doorstep. You walked out into green space straight away. So there was an element of complacency, I suppose, around this at times. I remember my dad. I'm actually at my dad's house at the moment. Unfortunately, we lost him very recently, so I'm down here, down actually 6 hours away myself on the lakes in Devon. But he used to come up and pick us up, and he used to look at the hills, and he'd go, "Oh, look at the views out there! Just take a look. How fantastic's that?" And I'd just go, "Yeah, yeah, it's just hills, Dad." Like I'd see it all the time, and just really didn't embrace what was there. But when I moved away to York for sort of university, I was always sort of speaking with pride about how beautiful the area was and how fantastic nature was around me. And I think really it was something that, even though I wasn't really embracing it fully at the time, I did very much appreciate how it made me feel when I was out there. It felt like a very natural place to be. It felt like humans were sort of meant to be. Maybe sort of that hunter-gatherer sort of evolution sort of path. And the cities never really had that same connection for me as such. Of course, you had many things available to you. And at the time, of course, moving from sort of quite a rural town into a big city at the time for me opened up many doors, mainly pub doors, but it was at the time, but it was much more of a plethora of options available for me at the time. But moving forward from that path, I think, yeah, I mean, I've been lucky to work with some sort of, school kids of recent years, sort of coming from the inner cities who really haven't experienced the outdoors at all. And you don't understand little elements, even the countryside corridor paths that we're sort of brought up with in those rural areas. Shutting a gate behind you and, taking care of the agriculture there and taking the litter home and various bits. And it's stuff that really you do take for granted as such out there. So for me, I think it's important not to lose sight of that. I was complacent in the past. It's trying not to get complacent now. I'm lucky to live in the Lake District these days in the centre of Ambleside. But for me, I think it really is almost that insignificance that you have of being in the outdoors. If you're out in those mountain ranges, those expanses, and you're out there and you really are, your problems get really squeezed down really into what it is, away from those menial stresses of life, having that escape moment, somewhere we're designed to be, that fresh air, activity in the outdoors, it's ticking all the boxes you want for sort of mental and physical health. And really, I think it's also having that sort of reset. A lot of things that bother us day to day, that bring us down, relationships and various bits, job paths, or the stress of maybe sort of deadlines and stuff in there, they're really put into perspective, I think, when you're out there and you really boil it down again. That's where that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in a way, just what is the basics? What do you really need out there? That sort of warmth, that shelter, that fire, that fuel, being out in that outdoors. And it's really something that I do really feel at home in. But it doesn't mean to say that this is very much not a linear journey for myself. It's still one of those, I still go through those peaks and troughs now. I mean, I'm over 9 years sober from that day, talking about that breakdown now in 2016, moving forward, but I've still had struggles along the way, very much so, and something that I have to really work at going forward. And even though I really know how benefit the outdoors is for me, there are moments that sometimes crossing that threshold of the front door, getting the boots on to go outdoors, I still feel like, oh, not today, or I don't really feel up to it sort of thing. But knowing how good I'll feel when I get out there. So it's trying to hold on to those memories of being at that spot, appreciating the privilege of the area I'm in, and also the privilege I've got to be able to go and enjoy those areas in the outdoors as well on a space like that. So, of course, not everyone's got the mountains on their doorstep, but finding some wonderful woodland, some lovely sort of lakes, tarns, and some fantastic coastal routes really are blessed in the UK. And even some of the cities, I mean, I look at that with a different eye now. And I go to cities for work, as you mentioned, for different conferences and speaking various bits of corporates. And I always saw them, as big concrete jungles, but there is the green space if you look for it places. So, I mean, I think I read a quote about London the other day, but it might have been the most trees in sort of a square mile here in London at various bits there, I think, in spots. And there are the green spaces to find, and, just making efforts to go out there, even enjoy a bit of lunch on a lunch break from work, or taking that moment after your dinner to go for a little 15-minute walk after that sort of spell. Try and really incorporate the outdoors into your lifestyle. It certainly helped me.
And you're so right that sometimes getting out the door, sometimes it's easier just, oh, I'll sit on the sofa, put the TV on, watch something on TV. And I really hope, listening to this, people listening to what you said about, even for you, sometimes it's hard to get out the door. And I hope we motivate some people to say, okay, right, I'm going to do it. This Sunday afternoon, I'm not going to sit and watch Netflix. I'm going to get up and go out the door. And you're right, London has got some absolutely beautiful parks. And any city now, there's so many cities now that they have really, I think some town planners somewhere have got the right idea for once and are actually making sure that these green spaces are really, I think maybe lockdown as well, really helped that people understand the need for that. So, yeah, any more thoughts about how we motivate people to just do it, just get out, even for 15 minutes, just get out the door?
Yeah, well, I think my early steps on this journey, of course, I was, grossly overweight and I was living a very lethargic lifestyle. It wasn't something I was embracing at all, really, for about sort of 7 years. I mean, the only walking I was doing was either to work or going to the next bar in town, really. I suppose the outdoor space, then my fresh air was being in the smoking area, I guess, at the time. So it's just the ironies are very, very different in that extent. But for me, I mean, there was a lot of I still had that sort of insecurity of starting, I suppose, at the first point of going, well, how am I going to be perceived going out here, going for a run down the street? People are going to be looking at me thinking, oh, he's not very fit, can't get down the road, and sort of stuff. And these are all internal battles, I suppose, I was facing at the time. And really, as things went on, you realise that no one's looking really that way. It's just completely internal on yourself, and that external pressures of people looking and judging as such. It wasn't there at all. And if there was even a very minor spot of that, for me, I really tried to play it in my head the fact that, well, it didn't matter how far I was going. It didn't matter how fast I was going. All these paths, I was doing more than the man would be sat at home on the sofa. So it was very much a competition of one all the time, trying to make progress, trying to put that one foot in front of the other, making each step forward towards progress. And it's something that really I have to try and re-step myself back into at times. I mean, we talked about lockdown briefly there, Joyce. I mean, that was something that I found a very difficult point, but felt very guilty about even feeling bad at that point, because I was in the Lake District, I was in a lovely area, and of course it was completely tranquil. The animals were coming back into the towns, and there was no cars anywhere. It was a beautiful place to be, but I was still working at the time as well, a food pass, and the work really sort of was taking up most hours of the day. And whenever you did go outside and stuff, you did for a little run, tried to keep routines going. I was a keen gymmer at the time as well. I'd be going there sort of 5-6 times a week, and that all shut down. So I lost a lot of these positive vices, and even though the mountains were just there, walking out the doorstep, you had the likes of mountain rescue saying, not to go into the hills and stuff in case something happened. And of course, then you'd be exposing, volunteers and stuff to the virus. And I completely understood that and didn't want to be, going against that grain. But even that sort of half an hour outside thing that was alluded by sort of Michael Gove, I think he said in a press conference, it was never gospel. It was just a one-handed comment. But the curtains would be twitching in town and people would be checking where you're from. Or you went down to get a bit of milk just in your raincoat and it was going, oh, he's come up here for the day for a walk. And it really, that pressure did get to me, and I went quite reclusive during that time, really, and I fell back in sort of inside a lot of the time, and rebuilding that since has been quite a difficult path. Even though the more I talk about this, it's like, come on, mate, it's 4 or 5 years ago now, you're still holding on to that path. But life's changed so much since then, I guess. It's trying to realign those routines and get them back into place, but it really does make you realise how essential that really was, and becoming, I suppose, a non-negotiable in that life for me. So again, looking back on that one foot in front of the other, there's one steps. It's always a competition against myself for me. It's never looking at other people. It's never thinking, oh, well, I'm not as fast as them, or they're going further, or I wish I'd climbed those mountains. It's all progress on my little point. One of the harder bits I have noticed in recent years has been the fact that at the start of my journey, it was always improvement. I was getting fitter, I was losing weight, I was getting stronger, I was going for longer in all passing there. Whereas coming back a little bit, restarting again, I'm now looking back at that sort of ghost of myself and thinking, he was faster, he was stronger, he was further. And that's been a different mental switch in some ways. Just trying to have that different mentality moving forward. But in each day, you can only beat the person you were yesterday, I think, in those paths. So it's moving forward along that push, and those little steps adding up. Now, I'm certainly not back to square one in these paths, but I may be sort of square 4 or 5. But there's a lot more progress. I've maintained that sobriety. I've maintained a lot of bits in there. I've still got those memories and experience of where I've been. So it's really not trying to focus on people looking at you in different ways. And I think that's definitely a thing at the gym. Some people get walking in that front door thinking all the eyeballs are going to be on them. No one's bothered. No one's fussing that way at all. This is your own path, your own journey, and just trying to go there at your own time as well. And any sort of effort is progress. So I think reevaluating that and accepting that. And also being kind to yourself, I think, as well. If there are a day that you miss things and don't grab that door on the threshold, we do want to sit and put the Netflix on for a binge. I mean, God knows I do it often enough, especially if the rain's really coming down. I think it's just it's accepting that and going, that's fine. We can restart again. It's not ripping up all the plans and that's it. It's all ruined. The streak's over. It's just going again, resetting and moving forward, that one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, I love that, and it's all about self-care. And don't worry. Yeah, as you say, don't worry if one day, I was at a festival at the weekend. Monday afternoon, I did spend a good few hours binge watching something on Netflix, and it's all fine. We mustn't be hard on ourselves, and we must very much practice self-care. And I gave a talk a few years ago at a conference, and the guy after me was a psychologist. And you've talked about the physical and mental health benefits of being in nature. And I've tried to find this study. I need to try and contact him and find this study. But he said there was a study where it was what we call a randomized controlled trial. So they gave people that had depression, they gave half of them the antidepressants, and for the other half, they told them to go for a walk for 1 hour every day outside. And at the end of the study, it was the people that had been out in nature that actually reported the biggest improvements to their mental health. And I'm sure you're not surprised at that data, are you?
No, not at all. No, I can really believe that. I think it's even for myself on that sort of path. Sometimes it could be that first maybe sort of 10 minutes of going, what am I out here for? Do I want to be out here today? Pushing forward, pushing again out the door, getting the boots on that first bit, or driving to the location. But within about 20 minutes, it's always a change. It's like something just sort of clicks into place and just resets, and the tranquility comes across the mind. And it all sounds, maybe a bit woo-woo in various bits of times, but it just seem a very natural place to be in. And the body naturally evolves into that sort of setting, I think, and sort of that chameleon-like sort of goes, right, I'm back here now. This is it. This is what we're moving forward to. Let's working on sort of, lungs, heart, movement of the legs, focusing on what's ahead of us, checking on sort of taking in all that space and perhaps, wildlife and sounds around you, and a real sort of plethora for the senses. So I can firmly believe that sort of study out there. And I suppose it's something that, as I've touched on a few times, you need to remind yourself of some days, because as we can be as humans, I think the brain sometimes takes over and goes, you did that yesterday and you enjoyed it, but it would be easy if we just stay in and do this today, wouldn't it? But you've got to push through that bit sometimes, and you will really feel the benefits. So I can firmly believe, there's a reason why it's a big part now, sort of green prescribing. I suppose now it's coming more into that setup of people being introduced to those areas and recommended to go to those spaces for all sorts of ailments, really. So it's great to see that sort of study being done and sort of proving that further as well.
Yeah, you mentioned rain. Let's talk about rain. So I'm someone that I never look at weather apps, and I don't worry about what it's doing outside, but I know for lots of people it does affect them. But I've heard a great saying, there's no such thing as bad weather, it's just bad clothing. So tell us about rain. What do you do if it's raining?
It's a great quote. I think that was Alfred Wainwright, actually. Well, it's been sort of put to him a few times, but I think many people have said it over the years, haven't they? People often say, it's my gran used to always say this, or various people. But it is true in some capacities. But I suppose, back then as well, the clothing maybe is a lot more suited these days as well for that sort of purpose. I can understand there are having sort of the respect for sort of the weather and the elements as well. You can't really go out in these really, really bad conditions and expect not to be beaten a little bit in some paths. So it's respecting nature in some ways there as well. Certainly in the mountains, when weather sort of bits out there can really, really cause a lot of danger. So whilst it's one that's sort of tongue-in-cheek and generally, yes, to get out of the house and if there's a bit of rain out there, do push forward. But for me, some people ask, what are you doing out there when it's really raining? What are you doing when you're cooking on the hills? What are you making there when you don't want to sit in the rain? I go, well, they're the days that I probably am sitting inside more. So I'm going for more of a woodland walk if it's not obviously a thunderstorm or paths there, or perhaps even a swimming. I really enjoy sort of that swimming out there in certain spots in the rivers. And if it's not a spate, of course, heavy rain, be careful in those spots as well. Or but we talk some more with more sort of the pollution side these days, of course, of storms and things as well. So watching out for those paths. But it's something that there's always time to be embraced, and you get that wonderful sort of sense, don't you? Of, I forget the name for it now, but the sort of smell that sort of the rain gives off when it hits the ground and sort of kicks up some of the soil and some of the bacteria in the soil, I believe, isn't it? And that sense that we get there and how fresh it really feels. And I actually love nothing better than if I'm out already and I've got the equipment, because again, always being prepared in little spots out there. Certainly in Cumbria, I mean, we can get 4 seasons in one day up here, so you have to be prepared. Even if the sun's all out in the morning, it could soon change. And of course, higher up in the hills, it can soon be a very different story as well. But being out in those spots there, if I'm out doing something like for a run or going for a hike, if it rains and I'm already out, I think I enjoy that actually more, being out there. I don't know, there's really something about it, but sometimes getting started in the rain is another sort of barrier that easier to put off. But when it happens when you're already out there, I think you really embrace it. Those wonderful sounds and the smells, it just heightens things in a different way. So, and I think we're looking at all different ways, I suppose. You know, it just really accepting nature for all different patterns. I think all different seasons and different bits out there. They all have different beauties, and of course, they all play into that setup, I suppose, of why certain environments look the way they do. I mean, even in our little gardens at home, if we're lucky to have them and stuff out there, again, it plays key roles in there. That water is life paths as well. And I think it's embracing whatever's out there at hands, but making sure you do have that right equipment. And if I'm really honest, if it's really coming down raining wise, that's probably when I'm going to take a packed lunch with me rather than my stove.
I love that. Right, let's talk about cooking. So I was a single mum for a long time, 13 years. So I used to love cooking, and then cooking for kids. I'm sure I'm not the only one. I really lost my love of cooking, and in the last year, I've really tried to embrace it. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you now more about cooking, and I've started doing a lot more. And I've mentioned I've got a camper van. I've got my stove now. I've got a stove inside, but I don't want to cook inside. I think it's a bit dangerous. Anyway, I've got my stove outside, so I'm starting to cook for friends more and just loving the love that makes. So tell us more. Let's get everyone motivated to do some outside cooking. So tell us more about, well, first of all, how you actually do it. So you've got a little stove. What else equipment do you have to cook outside?
Well, I think you touched upon a few bits there, Joyce. I think in terms of that, sharing food with other people, I think is the big bit that keeps me going. I think that's the bit that I really fell in love with, watching shows on the television, community, especially around the Mediterranean, of course, where the weather is slightly better than it can be here, which I'm sure is why outdoor cooking is maybe slightly bigger in areas like that. But it was that gathering of people, I think. It just felt so human about gathering around food and that giving of food. It was very much a real show of love, that gifting of something you've created, spent the time doing with fantastic produce and a real community effort. So that's the sort of mental image of sort of food and cooking that I did fall in love with on that path. You touched upon sort of cooking in the van, as many people do, and absolutely fine to do so, of course, with vents and bits out there, making sure you've got, I suppose, a carbon monoxide meter in there just to be sure on various patterns. But the cooking outdoors bit you touched upon, and you preferring that on the stove side, of course, you've got natural extraction, haven't you, out there, the ventilation side of things. So if you're wanting to cook something, perhaps, maybe some nice sort of fish out there and bits, or maybe it's quite sort of maybe smelly and perhaps as well, sort of spices or onions and stuff out there. It's not going to go on all your upholstery in the van either and stuff at home. So that can be an added benefit too, of course. But for me, it's really that sort of secret ingredient being cooking in the outdoors. It doesn't have to be something really extravagant. I quite like the challenge aspect of it in ways. I like to see what we can create out there. There is an element of sort of, I suppose, a slight homage to sort of the ancestors in a way, cooking over fire in the outdoors under the stars. Whereas I operate mainly in national parks these days. So again, it's how I'm respecting those areas. I'm not lighting any fires on the ground and stuff. I'm taking a sort of portable camping stove in ways. I'm always leaving no trace, bringing everything back down with me. Wanting that environment to be just as it was when I first went there, because it's been such a healing place for me that I wouldn't want to ruin that for anybody else that's going for the next time. But just that sort of moment of sitting out there, being still for a second. And this could just be, again, a packed lunch, something there's a bit of Tupperware, some leftovers the night before, spending that time finding a wonderful park bench somewhere. It could even be taking a food flask, driving to the coast, going for a swim in the sea, or just even a dog walk on the beach or something, going back to the car and you've got a nice hot food flask there with stuff you've heated up at home, kicked open, and just taking that time. It doesn't have to be complicated. But I do enjoy that element of taking stuff out there in quite its raw form, finding sort of a nice view spot, having that moment as perhaps the top of the mountain, laying out the stuff and preparing these sort of meals. Because I'm someone that can sometimes struggle with that shut off mentally at various bits. I can't sit and look at the horizon and be all sort of zen and just take it all in for hours in certain ways. I need to be sort of busy. And I think this day and age, you tend to sort of pick up your phone or something really, or try and, if you haven't got some company. So to try and avoid that, I find the actual mindful act of cooking and prepping and popping ingredients and chopping them up and putting them in the pan keeps my mind occupied enough to be still enjoying that time in the outdoors in a different way. And I'm not trying to encourage anyone to cook like this, of course, going, John O'Groats to Land's End and taking massive backpacks and stuff with them. For me, it's a little micro adventure in a way that the adventure Al Humphreys talks about. And just going for the coast of the day, going bouldering in the Peak District, going for a dog walk and taking a break halfway through, the lunch break at work, taking a meeting out and about, taking your lunch on the go. It's just those moments of weaving it into sort of day to day that I really enjoy. So, but that aspect really of the company, people often ask, what your favourite dishes to cook. It might come up in a second, I'm sure. But for me, it's very much just, that aspect of company as well, I think. If I'm out there with somebody else, it doesn't really matter what's in the pan as such. It's that activity of just sharing food in the outdoors together and just even sitting side by side, shoulder to shoulder, taking in that view at the same time, refueling, but also just sort of chatting and talking that I really sort of enjoy and embracing that. And of course, it could just be quite simply the barbecue sort of in the summertime, heading out there, bringing the family around for a barbecue outdoors. That all counts. It could be a picnic down at the park. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. But if you really want to take it more to sort of the camping stove and the little pots and pans and the chopping board and bits out there, then prepping something out, something that you're quite well versed with at home first, or a nice dish that you go to. You mentioned, of course, cooking for the kids in early years, Joyce. I mean, something I know really appreciate more my mum doing that as well, single mother growing up and stuff. And you remember sometimes you come back from school and be like, what's for tea? What's for tea? It had to be there, didn't straight away making. So you just got back from work as well, but we didn't realise that as kids at the time. Straight cooking away, getting something out there, trying to get the fruit and veg into the kids as well, and they're going, "What's that? Don't want that. What's this?" And seeing that in a different way, and I do completely respect that. And I think elements of perhaps using something that you cook quite a lot at home first to enjoy trying that in the outdoors first is a good way to start. Don't go straight away trying new equipment and a new recipe as such. But again, cutting some corners at home too. I mean, obviously, outdoor cooking is something that's different stages, perhaps. So, stage 0 or maybe stage 1 is the pot noodle, maybe just boiling the water up and pouring it in the pot. Stage 2 might be just buying some pasta in a pre-made sauce. And you're just cooking the pasta and pouring it in. Where stages 3, 4, you might be prepping stuff at home first, reheating in the outdoors, or again having it all in the Tupperware ready to pour in. But if you get to stage 5, you're going to be making nice focaccia bread from scratch and tagliatelle on the mountaintop and various bits and letting it air dry in the wind. Just me on that one, but it's but the challenge bit is what I really enjoy. I think the challenge of cooking outdoors, both on the equipment, the elements, being out there, but just that sort of time to be still and enjoy something to look forward to. Because I love my food. I didn't want to be someone that was getting a meal deal from the shops or jumping in the fast food. I never did that as a kid anyway. So I think when I'm out in the outdoors, why does food have to be the thing we have to sacrifice to go on these little adventures too? So that's sort of some of my inspiration, I guess, around outdoor cooking.
Well, I think you've given everyone some brilliant ideas there about what we can do. So all different stages as well. I'm at stage 4, so I was at I was at a festival this weekend. We had the summer camping stove. I'd already made the vegetable soup at home, and I'd made some granola at home and various things. But Harrison, I'm going to stage 5. This is it. You've given me the motivation. I am going to stage 5 in the next few weeks, and I spend a lot of time with people, as you say. Eating with people and sharing that experience is wonderful. But I have an absolute fantasy, and I know for some people they're not going to get this, but I want to spend some time totally alone. And you've just given me a really great incentive, because people have said to me, what are you going to do when you're alone somewhere in your camper van? What are you going to do? And Harrison, you've just told me, I'm going to do some cooking. I'm going to do some cooking just for me from scratch. I'm not going to take it ready made. I'm going to take the raw ingredients. And I'm going to do it, and I'm going to think about you, and I'll send you a picture. I'll take you in.
I hope so.
Level 5 is coming. So thank you. Thank you for all those brilliant tips, right from just taking a packed lunch out or a flask or something to going all the way and doing the whole thing. That's amazing. So I am going to ask you about your favourite things to cook. So tell us, what's your favourite?
I knew it would be coming. And you can never avoid this question, I think. And I always answer just like the politicians. I think every time it comes out, I think it's such a hard one because really, I love cooking. That's the bit for me. Again, as you said, I mean, hopefully that does help you maybe grab some more love around the cooking side again, having that time to yourself in that sort of environment. Because again, it's also looking out towards those sort of hills, fields, and bits where the stuff comes from as well. So I mean, it's reconnecting sort of food to where it's from, and especially in the UK, I think we sometimes lose that connection with food somewhat. It's all about convenience, what's quick, what's on the go, and even sort of seasonalities. We're sort of someone that goes to the supermarket and kicks off when the strawberries aren't in stock in December. Yet you go onto the continent and it's all about stuff that's in season, fresh when it's there, and just about the life cycles of different fruit and veg. So I think that connection side is something we lose somewhat. So that taking it into the outdoors and looking at those areas where it comes from, and perhaps the hard work that goes into it as well from the people that work the land and things out there, is a really important side too. But for me, again, if I'm really pushing, I do love that connection. I love cooking for other people, is what I really enjoy. So someone sort of says, about that's my favourite dish, and I can cook that in quite a unique space and cook that in the outdoors when we're on a hike somewhere. It's just adding a little sort of element in addition to that favourite dish they may have. But if I'm really pushed, I mean, I love sort of Greek cuisine. I love sort of sharing stuff, sort of meze platters and bits out there, slow cooked if possible, which of course not always on the camping stove. You want a bit speedier on the camping stove, perhaps, than like nice sort of slow cooked stews and various bits. But some Italian cuisines I love as well, which again I suppose this all embraces those elements of when I first read a lot of cooking books. I was watching shows on the television. I learned to cook with my grandma. I'm just self-taught in that extent. Never did any training in those paths. Whilst I worked a lot in hospitality, it was always mainly front of house as opposed to back of house. But it was always watching, learning, picking things up, and watching fantastic dishes that are handed down from different families. And I just love that side of it, really. The real love that goes through things and the memories that it evokes of different food. So Italian and Greek, I suppose, from those visions of cooking outdoors, the big long tables in the street, perhaps, which was all probably for the TV show that was coming through town that day. But for me, that sort of sits that memory in the head. And I suppose otherwise, I love sort of maybe sort of South Asian sort of dishes out there as well. I think some of the flavours that go into there, and just trying to really see a culture through its ingredients. And this day and age, of course, we're quite blessed with quite sort of globalized fusion of foods. We don't have cuisine-based bits from country to country now. It's sort of really all merged and mingled and found wonderful new recipes and different cultures and around there. So I think really it's taking things back and respecting where those roots have come from. And I just really enjoy learning about where things have come from, really, and sort of the family recipes or different sort of regionalities of various bits and stuff. That's the bit I really gets me going, I guess.
And you've talked about the different senses. So when you're outside, you talked about sound and smell and all these different things. So do you think food tastes different when you eat it outside?
I think it's definitely that secret ingredient, yeah, cooking it outside or just even eating out there. I don't know whether there's maybe a study into this sort of thing. It's certainly not something I've come across as of yet, but it just really feels like the place we're meant to be in those sort of patterns, I think. And whilst, of course, yeah, whether it was sort of the evolution of sort of cooking over the fire into more like the underground ovens, to then perhaps in the clay ovens, to more traditional kitchens this day and age. But taking food back out into its sort of roots really feels like the best place for it, I think. And whether or not it feels like it's slightly more, I don't want to say earned as such, that's going to be quite a negative thing, being out there and exercise and stuff. Certainly someone that struggles myself a little bit with moderation in food still and bits, but not to earn the food. But I suppose when you've done something out there to look forward to it more, then I guess having that moment of going, I'm really looking forward to sitting at the top of the hill and you're having a bit of lunch out there and we're going to have that rest point and stuff, then that can feel really nice to do. Or even just heading out after a long work day and just sort of going down to the coast and having that reset, as you say, a bit of a mental de-stress alongside about some food. It's always there in life getting weaved in, isn't it, around sort of fueling ourselves in somewhat. So I think when it does get weaved into very natural patterns as well, then it's undoubtedly, feeling as if it's a better elevated experience being in the outdoors as such. But I'm not sure there's actual science behind that, but it certainly always gets people going. And again, as you say, that amalgamation of the senses too, it's the little sounds of the chopping on the boards with the bird song in the background, and the sort of the smells that are coming through, the wind gusting past as well. It just, it's just a really, well, I keep saying it, but it's just a really human experience being out there.
I'm sold. I'm go- I'm out soon. I go and do something really soon. And so you've spoken a lot about the beauty of food, and I think what's really important in our life is creativity. I think it's something that I've called this podcast series Reclaiming Joy, but I think reclaiming our creativity is really important. And when I've interviewed a lot of women recently for my next book, and I've asked them about creativity, and some of them said, "Oh, I don't do anything creative," but then they say, "Oh, but I really love cooking, or I really love gardening," and I've said, "But that's so creative. Don't you think cooking is so creative? It's a win-win."
Absolutely, and I think I'm definitely that sort of mindset, Joyce. I think I'm someone that has that creative mind that can be a bit floaty at times as well. Sometimes maybe staying on track, and sometimes school was always quite a difficult one when it was all maybe long sort of studies or not so maybe theoretical essays and bits in there, but really excelled at the practical bits. I really enjoyed sort of chemistry at school. I enjoyed sort of geography and sort of the biology bits out there as well. Perhaps there's elements of that food is quite chemistry related as well. It's a bit of an experiment what's going together and what sort of connects and different flavors and spice points that work together in various bits or create different flavor profiles. So I can absolutely see that, and of course not only in the creation of just like a one pot dish, but then of course it comes down to maybe how it's getting plated afterwards as well, perhaps in certain pockets. I always like to, it's something that I'm still definitely learning. Not to the artistic levels that some of these fantastic Michelin star chefs do these days, but I do see that more as almost artistry than really chefing at times. When you go to sort of maybe the pub kitchen chef in there or the cook, where it's almost more like factory work, just knocking the stuff out constantly, getting that there to the same level. Very different from sort of the home cooking level, perhaps, where it's a much more slow, elongated activity and the one meal. They're all very different sort of skill sets. But the plating thing as well, it's something that I always found, and I already started sharing online. I didn't have an Instagram account at all at the start, but I'd take pictures of my dinner at home. And I suppose I'd be one of those annoying work colleagues that would come in and go, "Oh, yeah, I had this last night. Look how I made it look. And I popped it a little bit like this. And I tried to present it like this. And I was trying to improve that presentation." And whether or not it was just sort of to push me off and be like, yeah, stop showing me pictures of your dinner, mate. But one colleague, Yasmin, she said, why didn't you get an Instagram page and start putting pictures of your dinner on there? And I suppose naturally that's a very visual thing that encourages creativity. So you're trying to make things look very nice. And then when it got into the outdoors and it was cooking out there on the hilltops, I should say, of course, I'm not trying to get everyone to go and cook on the mountaintops either. This could just be, going to the campsite for the weekend or even just in the back garden. It could be the barbecue, it could be the picnic down the field. But again, that visual of that dish being plated up with that mountain view in the background, it was a real feast for the eyes in multiple settings. So I think that's really much why it's worked particularly well, perhaps on sort of social media and stuff in that setting. But even when it's me at home, people often, do you cook like this at home? I'm like, I do cook like this at home. It could just be me, but I still like to plate things up and stuff and make it nice for myself and little bits in there, because I don't know, that gives me I enjoy that activity, but it also gives me a bit of joy. Why should I sort of be putting things to a lower level when it's for myself, when I would do that for somebody else? It's kind of putting that self-care forward again as well and going, well, if I was going to go to those efforts for somebody else, why wouldn't I do that for myself? And I might sort of putting myself lower on the pedestal, so which I had done for many years, I suppose, in my younger years. So I think that's important too. But it's certainly a very creative practice for sure. And there's always experiments that maybe do go a bit wrong and don't always work, but you learn from there and you push forward, or perhaps that looks slightly differently. I suppose you get away with it more in art, don't you? I suppose you can always say, it's just modern art, that mistake. It's modern art, yeah. But I've gone down that path. But if you put too much salt in a dish or the wrong ingredient, I suppose, then no one wants to eat it, do they?
I've just cooked some sourdough today, and I think the scales went a bit weird when I was putting the salt in yesterday, and I was like, "Oh, have I just done this right?" Anyway, I've just eaten some of it. It's fine. So it's all good.
Amazing.
But yeah, I think obviously for me, food, what we eat is really important. And as you said, so many people, if they're on their own, they think, "Oh, I won't bother. I'll just get a takeout, or I'll just buy a ready-made meal." And so, how are you feeling about this toxic, ultra-processed world that we're living in? So many people, especially on their own, I think, going for that easy solution and just saying, "Oh, I'll just buy a ready-made meal. I can't be bothered doing this on my own."
Yeah, well, again, as I mentioned before, I suppose touching upon, if it's really raining, and I'm struggling to go outdoors and something, I'm no sort of, someone's put on a pedestal in this sort of path here. I fall into these paths too, as much as anybody else does. Again, certainly maybe sweets and chocolates, I'm terrible for, and moderation in those paths that's well documented in my backstory, I guess, whether it's alcohol, whether it's food, and even exercise at one point, perhaps. I think I was doing a bit too much at various paths, and if there's such a thing, but it's dominating that side. So that's maybe a mentality thing that I just sort of have in those sort of packets. But it can certainly be something to really look at. In terms of what we're consuming, I think it's okay every now and again to enjoy bits, as they always say, in moderation. Those past, if you're able to do that, I mean, I can't leave a packet of biscuits in the cupboard really, because I just always know they're there, and it's just that mentally, just in the back of your head, thinking, oh, there's a few biscuits left in that packet. So to me, it's more shutting it out completely helps me more. I suppose like the alcohol, it was trying to, it was all or nothing approach, I suppose. But I know some people can definitely have a much maybe healthier relationship with side of things there. But I think it's very much something that. It's okay every now and again for sort of treats in patterns there, but it's no wonder sometimes when we go for sort of maybe a takeout in various bits, or feel a bit sluggish the next day, or we go for a particularly maybe heavier drinking session the next day, feel a bit sort of maybe more paranoid about certain things. And it's no wonder it doesn't take really, again, sort of scientist or doctor, Joyce, in that setting, does it, to sort of work out really the fact that there's a reason why that's not making us feel as good. So I think if we're trying to look at what's going in and what we're fueling ourselves with, it is going to help us move forward in those patterns. But let's just say it's not to be a completely clean slate all the time and just be eating just completely, sort of like the nutritionist might say all the time in various bits of there, to enjoy food as well in certain patterns. So I think it's, again, tying that in with that lifestyle of time in the outdoors, activity, good produce. But if you do spend the time, and I think when you're spending the time perhaps in the gym or something, or down in the outdoors as well, you don't always want to come back as well, I think, and sort of just completely eat like that side of things either. I think there's a mental switch there, I think, sometimes that you want to go, well, I've just done that all day. I've just spent an hour working out, an hour and a half. Sometimes there's a reward for going, well, I can have a pizza and stuff tonight. But other times, I feel like less so that I want to do that daily, perhaps, when I'm doing that activity, because it's like a bit counterintuitive as well in some spots. But I think it's just been, I've never really sort of enjoyed the taste so much, I think, of a lot of processed sort of food and such like that. I think there is a convenience thing in there. And of course, there's a price point as well. I appreciate not everyone, can be enjoying a very, really nice ingredients and produce there, or the knowledge side as well. I've done a lot of work at sort of food banks and stuff with kids and various bits and taking them in there. And it's really amazing, again, sometimes, like I said about kids, pointing at a cow in the field and saying, is that a house, sir? Is that a horse, sir? A house, that would have been interesting, wouldn't it? A horse, sir? But again, like the food banks sometimes, not knowing what certain ingredients are as well. So again, there's a privilege point to that, an education side of things, these two, that, it's very easy when someone has the knowledge to go and say, oh, we'll just knock that up, or knock a pasta sauce together and just, pop that in there, a bit of this, bit of that, second nature. But again, sometimes if you're making those early steps, again, it's trying to respect that point as well and making small changes. But hopefully along the way, there's enjoyment in that as well, of learning a new skill as well, enjoying that creativity, if you are that sort of creative mind. And again, knowing what's going into your food, I think as well, it is a big thing. And I would argue it very much, 9 times out of 10, it tastes better as well. I think if you make it yourself with ingredients, you know what you're doing. There's nothing in there bulking it out or emulsifiers or stuff or preservatives in there. It tastes better when it's the fresh produce it's meant to be in ways as well. And I think there's a love of that process as well as the love of eating it at the end, I think, for me. So I appreciate I won't encourage everyone on that path, but I'm usually washing them down with some M&Ms myself afterwards as well. So I can't be putting myself on any pedestal.
Well, I am shining my halo at the moment because I'm coming into 11 months since I've stopped eating cakes, biscuits, sweets, and chocolate. So,
Wow.
yeah, my first ever podcast I did 3 years ago, I said that the one thing I've always been addicted to is sugar, and I've had a real problem with it. And I've been annoyed, and I've had a weight problem, and I've been really annoyed that I've eaten it, and I know it's really toxic. And listen, in small quantities, it's fine for sure. But I was eating
Well, it's
sugar
everywhere now, sugar as well, Joyce, isn't it?
It's
It
everywhere.
seems to be
It's
everywhere.
everywhere.
It's in all sorts of food.
It's not our fault for sure because the marketing
Yeah.
is off the scale. But for me, I had so many. I've got a few friends who are dietitians, and they said, "Oh, it's fine, just have a treat." But every day, someone was putting a treat in front of me, cakes for celebration. So every day, someone was saying, "Oh, but it's a birthday cake, or it's a wedding cake, or whatever." Or anyway, I just said no. I just got to stop. So I'm going to be very happy on August the 20th when I'm celebrating my 1 year with. Can I just say a funny story that I was just reading today about people being bitten by mosquitoes, and apparently they love it if someone eats a lot of sugar. And touch wood, I don't think it's a coincidence that I haven't been bitten this year.
I've heard that one before as well, I'm not sure if it's the same for the Scottish midges out there. Maybe it's all the shortbread up there. I don't know, in different extents. But But it's yeah, I've heard that one before. But sugar, yeah, it took. I found that when I stopped drinking as well, Joyce, that my sugar sort of cravings went through the roof in patterns there, and sort of switching that at times, maybe switching one thing for another. But again, sometimes I can be a fiend, I suppose, for sort of sweet stuff later in the day. But notice if I have it early doors, it just knocks me completely. If I'm not doing the activity, if I'm in the hills and stuff, then obviously it's a great source of some energy, a little boost along the way and going forward. But back when I was in sort of maybe the office job and things, if you had sort of a cake at lunchtime there, I'd be falling asleep by 3 o'clock, just crashing, and sugar there, probably be in bed early and stuff. It just has a real effect in patterns there. But that's fantastic. Nearly a year. I mean, I think that's something I'd look forward to doing in the future. But I'd only have caffeine left then.
I don't drink coffee.
Oh, amazing!
I don't drink tea or
Wow.
coffee. And I've never ever drunk a coffee. Right, we're slightly moving away from food because we've talked about the importance for food. Food is really it's always the first pillar of health and well-being that I always talk about. But the second is exercise, and I know that you said that mountains are your gym, and you said you go to the gym, but obviously when you're in nature and in the lakes and that you're walking and climbing, are there any other exercises that you do when you're out in nature?
In nature, I mean, yeah, I mean, we touched upon swimming to some degree. I mean, I may be more of a dipper in certain spots. I enjoy sort of the colder conditions out there. I enjoy too, but that's all going to have its benefits that I'm sure you've spoken about on previous podcasts, Joy. But it's been a fanatic yourself for sort of the cold water experiences out there. But I think all aspects again. I was a keen gymmer at one point, so that was more indoors. But again, where it's running in various bits. But I suppose there's been an element of recent years that I felt a bit touched upon, maybe looking back at your former self in somewhat. I mean, lockdown, I sort of ended up sort of falling back on food a bit more. I wasn't going outdoors as much. I mean, I put a bit more weight back on. And I had, really stripped down at one point from sort of 22 stone to about 15 stone and stuff, and was very much living a very different life, very much fitter moving forward, and loving my running and stuff. But it's been something that I've been trying to really get back to those same sort of levels moving forward, and still struggling a bit, I suppose, with weight again the second time round. Perhaps there was such maybe encouragement from me that first year, that full change on all platforms. I guess it was, whether it was cigarettes, alcohol, weight, lifestyle, everything moving forward. But knowing the fact that, as I said, touched on earlier in this sort of episode, that the benefits of when I'm out there, I never regret that. They always say that the only workout you regret is the one you don't do. And the same with the outdoors. I mean, seeing that, not as a workout, but just as a lifestyle sort of choice of being out there. But for some, it might be taking out a bit more of a journey to go to those pockets into. But it's really trying to embrace all aspects. But anything out there, I think, is all good. Just getting moving in all regards. Doesn't have to be fast, doesn't have to be far. Could be smaller bits out there. Could just be the routine of taking the dog out, as we touched upon, or getting the kids out for a little spell as well on the weekend and stuff. Even if it is raining, just getting a little spell outdoors. We used to get sort of forced out the door, didn't you, when you were sort of kids now, when we were younger, I think. Just getting out there, being on the console too long, watching too much telly, just get out there and come back later. But it's really beneficial, I think, being in all aspects there too. And I certainly notice when I don't do it. And you find that's another little sort of, whether there's the temptation of, having a little bar of chocolate, or again, where there was been the passive, a cigarette or a drink. I get the same perhaps if I've not been outdoors, not been for any exercise too. I find myself getting quite irritable or a bit sort of narky and stuff. And your body's requiring that as well. So I think when you're at a point where you haven't started, and I'm a bit stop-start at the minute, it can be difficult to sort of relate to that, because you think, no way I'm going to think that way. But almost once you get past that sort of 3 weeks of really pushing that sort of routine into play, you do get into that mode where your body's sort of just craving that too, and you'll be wanting more of it as well, it does very much get easier on those paths to sort of maintain, but it still takes work. And all these paths do, whether it's coming off the sugar, like you say, whether it's the alcohol for myself. It's 9 years now, but I always do see it for myself as, still one drink away in certain points, even though the mindset's very different now. No cigarettes. I mean, if I pick one up again, I might sort of fancy a few there again. So it's very much something that you've got to work out on these different patterns. So whether it's food, exercise, or some worse vices in that path too, I think, again, it's little steps, as I touched before, those adding up. And again, that time in the outdoors, I think, can't be beaten.
Great advice. Now, Harrison, I do a lot about women's health, and you're the first man on this year that I really wanted on because of your journey and how you've dealt with your mental health and physical health. And I'm going to get some more because I just think it's so important, and we often leave men behind. And it's really important to have guys like you on who can share your story and motivate people. Do you think things have improved for men, and what else can we do to help men's health, especially men's mental health? Because I hope people are aware of the figures for men's suicide, that it's higher than women at every age group, and I think probably most people, unfortunately, listening will be aware of somebody, a man who has ended his life, and I think we need to do more to help men's mental health. So, what can we do to improve things for men?
Yeah, well, firstly, again, thank you again for having me on, George. It's a real pleasure to be on, and for those that are listening as well. But I suppose on that sort of point, it's something that, from my point of view, I would definitely see things that they have certainly improved from maybe my teenage years and bits in there, whether that's just a knowledge, whether that's open communication now, conversation, whether it's sort of stigma sort of coming down in some ways, whether it's help groups and bits out there too. But of course, there's always more to do. And the reason I think sometimes where if you're in that and hearing that message quite often, it can sometimes be, oh, yeah, another awareness day or another spot in here. But there's still many people that are still reaching out and don't know where to look to for any help in sort of patterns here. So it can be easy when you're in that sort of mode, or as we talked about before, when you're in certain activities or when you're in certain knowledge groups, you get complacent. Like, again, if it's in the lakes and various bits or in the beautiful spots, you can get complacent. Whereas, too, when you're in these little worlds of talking about the conferences we probably both attend, you're hearing it all the time now. Almost, it's no longer a buzzword. It's just always there. But from those outside, removed from that setting, it's not. Is it still getting talked about? On the sort of the shop floors, or the construction yards and bits out there, and it needs to be pushed on more, being accepted more in those patterns. So it's been great to see fantastic, support groups appearing now, and I'd really encourage people to go to those where they can do. I think there's a real help for sort of, it's not so much a therapy thing, but just sort of just blokes coming together to share problems that are going in their day-to-day life. It's not sort of a clinical thing as such in there. It's just very much a bonding thing, I think, at times too. I mean, if you want to take that to other levels, there's some great sort of men's-only retreats and stuff now you can attend as well to feel places that sometimes it is beneficial, I think, to sort of separate those bits out there. But walking alongside a friend, I think, is one of the best things you can do. Just being out there. They always say, like, driving in a car is one thing too. When you're not face-to-face with someone, looking eyeball to eyeball, it feels more like a job interview. It gets, the fight or flight goes a bit, and you can feel yourself a bit hunched up, not wanting to share things as such. But when you're walking alongside somebody, or even driving on the destination alongside somebody, you're still talking, you're still present, you're still very much bonded one-on-one. But it can be a bit easier to release some of the things that are going on in day-to-day, some of the struggles. And I think that's the one thing that really has changed a lot with blokes more. I've noticed a lot, certainly with my friends now, where I felt very, very alone growing up and didn't know what I was going through, didn't understand what it was. Where now, I can relate to sort of, film stars, as I said before, sports stars, people on the television, other peers. I've had friends who've reached out and talked about, my mental health's not great at the minute. And it's part of the conversation now, which is great. But sometimes that might be an element of being in that space, but also if one person is opening up, it can be that vulnerability. And I think blokes certainly have that to certain degrees. If one person goes out there first and be a bit vulnerable, it really encourages others. And I've noticed that a lot in my talks that I've done in various bits. I always put it akin to the year 7 disco at school, when it was all the girls on the dance floor and the blokes were all on the chairs waiting for the first person to go out there first and make the move or go for a dance. And once they did, they all went, oh, okay, it's safe, we can all do that. And it's very much the same, I think, with problems and mental health with blokes. I think if one person goes out there and just puts it out there, the others feel so much safer to do so, because there still is that fear of embarrassment or judgment or seen as a weakness in various, particularly in blokes. I mean, for everyone, as such as sure, but it's not a weakness at all. It's very much a strength in those patterns, that vulnerability, being able to analyse, being able to be self-aware of those thoughts and make the change to want to change as well, because we all just want to be happy. And as your podcast says, we all want to find that joy. And we all just want to be happy really in life. And sometimes we find our way trying to find happiness in the wrong sort of boxes at times. I mean, I certainly was looking at that with alcohol. That was giving me that escape for a brief moment. But ultimately, it wasn't really doing me the long-term sort of joy or happiness. It was dragging me further. It was small dopamine hits in patterns. Whereas now I find that a lot more through exercise and time in the outdoors, bits out there as well. That love of cooking or with company and chatting. So I think there's a lot that has changed. I think there's a lot of improvements going forward. There's still a lot going on behind the scenes, but there's always more that can be done. And for anyone that is suffering out there, I would really encourage to speak out to somebody. You don't have to speak out to family, friends. That can be quite difficult, but speak out to some fantastic charitable helplines, medical professionals out there. Could even be digital these days. There's fantastic social media or even sort of quite anonymous conversations in chat rooms and stuff out there too. But really encourage to not suffer in silence, because you are not alone through this. For many years I thought I was, but there's many, many people out there too that are going through the same. So reach out, I think, together continue breaking down those walls.
Those are such wise words. That's brilliant. That's really, really brilliant. And my 5 pillars of health that I always talk about. So I mentioned nutrition, I mentioned exercise. One, sleep, and I think everything you're doing would absolutely help our sleep. So that's tick, tick, tick. The fourth is mental health, big tick, and the fifth is friendships and community. And if you look on almost any website to do with chronic health conditions, so heart disease, dementia, cancer, they will tell you that these are what we should be doing. These are 5 things that we need to sort out to keep us healthy. And what you're doing is ticking everything. so not surprised it's going to really help our mental and physical health. And Harrison, I've called this podcast "Why Didn't Anyone Tell Me This?" So are there things that you've been doing and you've helped people with, and they've said, "Wow, I didn't know that. Why didn't I know that before?" I think there's many things that I can imagine that people have said to you.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there's in a personal way, or for people on the outside. Do you mean? Sorry.
Well, anything really, anything, either.
Well, I think personally, I mean, a lot of it, it's not rocket science, is it? In certain ways, I mean, for me, for so long, from 13 onwards, really going for that overnight change, to really beat myself up at the time, to not want to be here, to finding different vices to try and keep myself present, and really, it was quite simply just almost going for a walk in the outdoors for me. It was putting on my boots and going outdoors, something that was already on the doorstep. It was such a simple thing that was there, so accessible, and accessible for nearly all of us, out there all the time. I mean, I'm sure there's people who maybe struggle with different abilities and things out there, but can find ways to get into the outdoors in such patterns. So that really, it wasn't kind of a major, unveiling of the sort of the curtain and going, wow, look at this newfangled thing that's going to change my life. It was just there. And sometimes I think we overcomplicate these things somewhat. I think we try and find resources or escapes through maybe means that really, when we boil it down to what we essentially need, again, that hierarchy of needs in touch as well, and those 5 pillars you mentioned, it's quite simple when you put it down to it, really, but it's just sticking to those principles and being sort of disciplined to that sort of element in some patterns. So I wouldn't say there's anything in particular someone pushing forward, but since then, I mean, I've had the messages reaching out from people that, have asked, how I've done this pattern, or how can I help somebody else go through these bits. And I'll always say, this is very much my personal experience. I'm not a medical professional. I'm more than happy to share my lived experience, but it can be very different for people individual basis. But there is usually quite an overlap in some patterns from different elements that we can all benefit from these times. And those 5 pillars, as you mentioned, I think it's only going to improve things by looking at those basics. So, but other bits that really helped me, I really found journaling quite useful. During my journey, I found writing things down was a very useful thing for me. I remember when I was first sort of given a little journal to write, and I was going, what's this going to do? Writing down my thoughts? What's all that about? That's not going to help me, is it? But I really found that quite a therapeutic practice, to sort of sit in and just writing next enough. It wasn't like a Dear Diary type thing. It was just how the day had gone, or it was improvements I'd had, little bits, and you could look back and go, actually, I was doing a lot more there, or I've come a long way from that pattern. I'd just go to the coffee shop, and I was trying to get a new routine. I'm not going to the pub and various bits, but sometimes I went to the pub anyway, and I had a tonic water and sat in the corner. But I appreciate that's not for everyone in that setting. Maybe sitting in the barber's chair too much, more likely to get a haircut and all that. And but enjoyed that practice, I think, of being sat in that space. And ultimately, that naturally evolved to me into sharing online. It was just maybe an online journal. It was just me being quite vulnerable out there, just sharing the thoughts I was having anyway, but now in a public space. So I found that a practice that was very helpful. But other than that, as you say, those communities and pillars, finding a group of like-minded people. Again, people will always ask, well, that's all well and good. You had some good friends, and it really was a privilege looking back. I had a great support network of people that were still in my life, that I was lucky to still have in my life at that point. But if people go, well, I haven't got that, where can I find them? But there are fantastic groups around these days, whether it's hiking groups, walking groups, cooking classes out there, to men's support groups. And a lot of these are free and available in all various areas too. So just having a search for those online somewhere, or asking other people about them, is a fantastic bit. So I've kind of gone off topic a bit on your question there, Joyce. But yeah, for me, it was those sort of basics, I think, in front of you, and just try not to overcomplicate things sometimes, and sticking and being disciplined.
No, that's brilliant. And loneliness is a real problem. It's a killer. So we must stay away from that. And Harrison, the last few questions that I ask everybody, because I'm quite obsessed with happiness. So I think I know what you're going to say, but What makes you happy and where is your happy place?
Oh, maybe I should throw a curveball. That's it. Complete curveball now. No, it's again. I mean, obviously, yes. Top of the mountain, love it. In the kitchen, love it. And various bits out there. Going down to the food market and stuff, being in there, or searching for new produces, or a new experience in a restaurant, love it. But essentially, I think about the happiest moments and the best memories I have in my life always relate to company with other people. So whether it could be, an event I've gone to, not always old term friends or old term family. It might just be, as you say, a festival we've been to lately. I mean, Joyce and I have recently spent some great time in a festival in Wales, like the Big Retreat, and places like that. Like minded people around, sort of such in too, or sporting activities. But yeah, family events and things out there, or just time with friends. I think are the bits that I always value the most in patterns there. So they're the bits I'm most happy with. It's quite situational, I suppose, rather than locational. But really, when you're with the right people, I think you could be anywhere in those settings, really. And I think when you find those people that complement um, your thoughts and bits out there, and they're not judgmental, you aren't to share certain things in your life, and they're there to support you, and you are with them back as well, then that really is finding your tribe. And I think ultimately, again, it boils down to a lot of those basics, those hunter gatherer basics of finding your tribe. And yeah, for me, it's the company, so family, friends, and new friends and acquaintances along the way.
So many times you've said at the end of your what you were saying exactly what I was going to say next. You've done it many times today, which is it's just so amazing. And I was just about to say, find your tribe. It's I think it's so important to find our tribe, and I'm absolutely there. I think without finding your tribe, there might be lots of different tribes. I've got lots of different tribes. I think it's really important to reclaiming joy for sure, for sure. Now, this for you, I think more than anyone I've ever asked, I think this is a really important, very final question. What advice would you give your younger self?
Yeah, it's a tough one in that set because I mean a lot of people could say that obviously you could look to regret various things you've done or things to change or not live that life in various bits, but in some ways I certainly regret maybe certain behavioural things along the way and stuff out there that maybe went along the way, but the journey I've been on, I think, is the reason I'm the person I am now, and I think, and really becoming that person I wanted to be. So, whilst I'd certainly want to not cause that that hurt along the way that I caused to previous partner or family and stuff out there, and I wasn't a physically aggressive person, any bits out there, but I was certainly someone that wasn't reliable, and I was letting people down all the time, and I was putting things ahead of everybody else financially, and that whole not wanting to be a burden bit I mentioned, and looking back towards the end is exactly what I became in a way. I was trying to keep myself sheltered and reclusive and just doing this for me and keeping myself here and really just the bottom of the heap myself. But around the people that love you around there, that brings them down into it as well. So I actually not want to be the burden and trying to live a lifestyle that was exactly causing that sort of pain and hurt to other people. So that's the bit perhaps I would change, not on the journey, but myself and my path. Um, I wouldn't change the path I've been on. Really, I think it's really led me to where I am. I think it's led me to a lot of whether sort of revelations or understandings about who I am, maybe and what I enjoy, and also the non-negotiables that have gone through things too. I mean, sometimes life can't be easy at all times. There are moments of hardship in there, and I think the alcohol as such. People often say, do you miss having a drink and stuff out there? And of course, sometimes there are moments where it comes into play, but the sensation sometimes I miss. I think of that having that moment to just have an escape and just have a bit of a shut off and just have a bit of a pause in life sometimes. But without that, it means I have to be present through some of the harder moments in life, but it means I'm far more present through the better moments in life as well. So that to me is an absolute win. But if I had to boil it down to one thing I'd say to my younger self, I've said this before on a previous podcast, but I would just simply say the word stay. Because for me, for so long, I didn't want to be here. For so long, I was just looking for my way out, questioning. I was very much keeping myself here for other people, but these days I feel like I'm happy where I am. Really, there's still things I work on, various bits, and not every day is completely rosy. But from where I was at one point, I'm glad I stayed. So I'd tell the younger person, stay.
I was about to say, I'm glad I didn't cry again, and now you just made me cry again. Oh, Harrison.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
No, no, no.
Tried to say
No, I think
so.
you are
Yeah,
an incredibly wise and wonderful person. It's been a real privilege. I'm so happy I met you at the Big Retreat Festival, and this has been one of the most moving podcasts I've done. Obviously, I've cried twice, so thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you everything you're doing to help everyone, but especially men. I'm sure so many men relate to. We do need to see someone that looks like us. I think that is important. So seeing a man opening up as you have and being so honest and vulnerable, putting it all out there, Harrison. Honestly, thank you so much for everything that you've done, and I'm sure you. I'm not joking. I'm sure you saved lives, and thank you for your work, and may it long continue. And I look forward to meeting you again soon. And thank you so much for being on this podcast today. And I'm sure people are going to reclaim their joy.
thank you. Thank you for having me. And yeah, hopefully we get a cook in that camping van soon.
Yes, well, outside the camper van. I like being outside it. I don't like being inside it. I know, I love being inside it, but yeah, cooking outside. We will sit outside, and I'll have to cook you something for sure. Thank you.
Amazing. Look forward to it. Thank you again.